Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is Substantiating Claims for Online Sales. A couple of sort of house rules before we get started. So this webinar is being recorded. Everyone who is registered will be sent the link straight afterwards because this is saved on the cloud. So there'll be a link, you can share that with your colleagues. There's no kind of privacy for this. It's a free webinar for all. So that recording will be sent at the end. There is also going to be an opportunity for question and answer towards the end. So if you've got any questions as we go along, please feel free to make a note of them because there will be plenty of opportunity to answer those. And again, I will send the link from my email and you can reply directly to that with any questions. If you think of anything after the webinar, it's no pressure to sort of answer things during this. So a bit of background about today's webinar. So if anyone's sort of come from LinkedIn or anything like that, you'll see my reasoning is because we're at a time right now during the COVID-19 pandemic where people are really focusing on online sales. There's no bricks and mortar shops open. In some countries, they're starting to open, but generally, we're going to see a really big shift into online sales kind of across the world from now and possibly really impacting the whole future. It might stay around and be the way that people shop mainly for years to come. So I really wanted to make a webinar about this specifically and substantiating claims. A lot of people, might be used to online sales and used to having those global claims because obviously people can access your products better from other countries if the product's online. But some of you may have products that have gone online and you're finding you're selling in countries that you don't necessarily have claim substantiation for. That's appropriate for the territory in which it's now being sold. So it's kind of talking about the advertising standards there and the kind of evidence that you're going to need about your claim. It's also going to show you, I've got some case studies from some of our lovely clients that I'm able to share with you, and it's going to really show you how you can use those claims on your online sales as well. So it's not just about the compliance, it's going, well, how does consumer research and evidence to substantiate your claims really help you sell your product across all kinds of online platforms? So the agenda today, we're looking at global advertising standards, organizations. So I'm going to do quite an overview. I couldn't go into every single advertising organization across the world, but it just gives you an overview of, what kind of advertising organizations there are, how to find them, that kind of thing for those territories in which you're selling. There's certain legislation out there for things like online product reviews and social media influencers. So I'm going to touch on that as well, just to give you an idea of, how you should be responsibly using these ways of advertising. I'm going to touch on some of the penalties for misleading adverts as well, and what a misleading advert is. And then methods of claim substantiation and how you choose the appropriate study design and methodology. And like I said, I'll be sharing some case studies to show you, really demonstrate that as well. So a little introduction to myself. My name's Karis. I am the Consumer Studies Regulatory Specialist for H and Global Research. So basically what that means is I'm at the forefront of all the regulatory things that affect our business, that affect consumer research, and that affect our clients in terms of how they can use our research in their advertising and everything like that, so making sure they've got the right study designs. So I really started off as a study manager for the company. So all of our clients get a bespoke study manager who understands you inside and out and understands how you're using your data and the claims that you want to substantiate to make sure you can use those legally in the territories you want to sell your product. So that's how I started out. Then I went into training. So I trained the clients as well as the staff. I noticed there was a gap in terms of knowledge about regulations and how that all kind of came in together, whether it's advertising regulation. We do all industries, but a lot of our clients are cosmetic. That's where you see the most claims. So there's a lot about cosmetic regulation as well worldwide and how that all fits together basically. What are the cosmetic regulations and the other industry regulations? What are the advertising regulations? And how does that affect how we need to conduct a study? So that's my specialism. So most of my day-to-day job is meeting with people, or at the moment, having calls with people, to understand the claims you want to make about your product and how your intended use of those claims are in terms of your markets, and making sure that you have the correct evidence about your products so you can legally make those claims. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And obviously a big part of it is conducting these webinars as well, because obviously the more information I can spread about this, the better. It's really important to make sure you don't have those uncompliant claims about your adverts. So just an overview of today. So online sales market, what does that look like? Sorry, 2 seconds. So basically the online sales market is huge. It's one of the most popular online activities worldwide. So that's the really important thing about it, is like I was saying, it's all about that global look. When you're looking at online, it stops it being kind of restricted to one country. Obviously, it depends where you can import your products and export your products. But really, it's something that is completely worldwide. No matter what country you're looking at online sales, or e-commerce. The total health and personal care sales that made online is about 10%, which sounds pretty small, but actually if you think about how many products are sold in terms of cosmetics and beauty, that's a huge amount of revenue that people are making just from online sales. So nothing else, it's literally just from online. So it's really important to kind of keep an eye on this direct-to-consumer advertising. So basically, if you're selling online, you're able to sell your brand directly to them. You don't have to use a sort of platform like things like Boots, Holland & Barrett, things like that to get your health and beauty products out there. You can do it from your own websites. So people use a lot of things like social ads, targeted social ads, things like influencers. And we'll be touching on all of that today because online sales is totally huge. It's a huge subject. I want to touch about COVID-19 as well and online sales. As mentioned, it's really, really important at the moment and something we need to consider when we're looking at our sales. So there's been a huge rise in online sales. I think that's a given because obviously people can't shop indoors. People are still buying beauty. I've got some other webinars about specific types of beauty products and other kinds of products. So if you're interested in those as well, I talk about, how people are purchasing certain products during COVID-19. But basically, there's just been a huge rise. So if you've got products, basically, you want to be selling them online right now. There's a really interesting sort of quote I found from Cosmetics Design Europe, where they're talking about how cross-channel marketing, which is basically from stores into online, can cost sort of up to millions of pounds and usually takes about 5 years to achieve, or up to 5 years to achieve. That's no longer an option. It needs to be done now. So it's all been a bit crazy for people that haven't had to sort of think about online until now. So there's people that can definitely help about it, but it's kind of expect a lot of investment is what I would say, because it's expensive anyway. And obviously that by reducing that time limit, you're going to have to spend more money. So it's kind of just pointing that out and saying it's not going to be a cheap task if you're not currently selling online. So what is ad self-regulation or advertising self-regulation? So when I'm talking about advertising standards organizations, I'm generally talking about self-regulatory organizations. So I just wanted to give an overview of it really, because like I said, I can't be too specific in terms of countries, although I will touch on some. But it's really important, if you don't know about advertising self-regulation, you need to be aware if you're selling products. This is where people are, this is where the organizations are that will be regulating your adverts and possibly withdrawing them from advertising platforms. So basically, the overall idea, no matter what country you're looking at, is to actively ensure that advertisements are legal, decent, honest, and truthful. It's quite simple kind of things to live by, but obviously there's a lot of detail within that, making sure that you're not offending anyone ever with your advertising, but most importantly, what you're saying is completely true, and you'll always need evidential support to make sure that that's true. Who's involved in advertising self-regulation? It's the advertisers who pay for the advertising. It's the advertising agencies responsible for its form and content. And then it's also the media that carry it. So there's kind of this triangle of people that you need to be aware of that are advertising your product, as well as the adverts that you're putting out there yourself. And you all need to be working together to make sure that these ads fit under that legal, decent, honest, and truthful bracket, because you can all be at fault if an advertisement needs withdrawing, or if it needs penalties involved. If one of you hasn't kind of flagged that there's an issue, no matter which kind of angle you're coming at it from, you can all be at fault there. It's also a platform for people to complain about products. So that's really how advertising self-regulations work. They do also look at adverts before they go onto the market, but generally, because that's such a huge task, you can't kind of like, unless people come to you, you can start advertising products online. I could make a product tomorrow and start advertising it on Instagram. It wouldn't be compliant, but I could do it. So the ASA wouldn't necessarily know. Sorry, I'm talking about the ASA as an example there, which is the UK one, but obviously this is talking about globally. They wouldn't necessarily know I put that advert out there because no one's warned them. But what it does mean is that competitors and consumers can complain about my advert. They can say, okay, we've seen this person has made a product on Instagram. The adverts don't seem right. They seem really misleading. Again, whether that's a consumer that wants to, would be interested in purchasing the product, or whether it's a competitor who has seen it and said, well, I don't think that they have that evidence behind that claim. They can complain to these self-regulatory organizations, and then they will investigate it and basically make sure that the ads are removed or corrected from the platforms. Some countries have worse penalties. So generally we say about corrected or removed. The UK and the EU are pretty nice like that. They'll just say take down the ad. But if you're looking at other countries, you could have humongous fines, or in America, particularly in the States, you could have lawsuits against you. So really, really important to make sure that you're understanding the advertising in your territories. But a couple of links there. Sorry, there's a lot of information on this slide. There's a couple of links there. One's for the International Chamber of Commerce, who have got a self-regulatory framework that countries adopt for their own self-regulatory organizations. So I always say that's a really good place to start. It's adopted by about 42 countries worldwide at the moment. So it's a good place to start and have a look at, what does this framework mean? Who's adopting it? Are the territories that I'm selling in adopting that framework, and who are the organizations that have adopted it? There's also ICAS, which is the International Council of Advertising Self-Regulation. Now, they were set up by the European Advertising Standards Alliance, but they are actually a global council, so anyone can join them across the globe as long as they're all going with the same code of conduct. But it means that they're all working in the exact same way, and they'll have the exact same code of conduct, and they're all making the same updates to their code of conduct. So there's been updates about things to do with COVID-19 and things like that. So ICAS is a really good place to start looking for, again, those members. Who's a member of ICAS? If you're kind of satisfying one of their code of conduct, you're satisfying all of them, so it makes your job a lot easier when you're looking at your adverts and seeing if they're compliant. But it's also really important to look at updates there, because generally if there's updates on the ICAS website, they will be reflected in most advertising standards worldwide. So a lot of information there, but it just gives you an overview of ad self-regulation if you haven't looked at it before. And again, please feel free to look at those links if you want some more information, or those companies. So just to give you kind of some more specific examples, because obviously it's really good and well talking about the overall kind of picture of the globe, but who are these organizations relevant to the countries? So I've just picked out 5 examples. Just from different parts of the world, just so you can see it now. Basically 4 of these are part of ICAS and 1 of them isn't, and I'll explain that. So the UK, India, Australia and Brazil are all part of ICAS, so they're all self-regulatory organizations. They all have the same board of complaints, the process of complaints. People can complain to them and they have to get evidence to sort of show that their claims are substantiated. In the USA, so I always like to bring this one up, you've got the Federal Trade Commission, which are not a self-regulatory organization. They are a federal company, which means federal agency, which means that they're not necessarily kind of dealing on a complaints basis, or they do deal with complaints. They're actually more policing the landscape of advertising. And obviously, like I said, there's worse penalties in the USA because of this. So they help support lawsuits if they find that a lot of people are complaining about it. I think we've all seen the information about Johnson & Johnson removing their baby talc from the States, from the consumer market there. And we know that there's been a huge lawsuit going on there between the FDA as well, the FTC, and also Johnson & Johnson involved there with the baby talc situation. I think if you're anything to do with the cosmetics industry, you would have heard of it. So that's a really good example of how extreme these companies can work. Obviously, that wasn't just about advertising, that was about the ingredients itself, but obviously you can't advertise a product that is thought to be unsafe. So there's been a huge case there. If you're not familiar, it just gives you a really good idea of how these federal agencies can work together to make sure that consumers basically are satisfied with the result. If they've got a problem with the product. So that's kind of some ideas of advertising standards, regulation, organizations. I also want to talk about some advertising laws, because just because you might say, okay, I'm looking at advertising in this country, they haven't got an advertising self-regulatory organization, they have no code of conduct, I can just advertise my product as I want. Absolutely not. There is always advertising laws in every country. So there may be, so it's really important to note that, like I said, the advertising self-regulatory organizations will probably be asking you to withdraw your ads. But if you're upsetting advertising laws, obviously your adverts are illegal, and there could be way harsher penalties again about, what your advert has kind of put out there, if it's against those laws. So I'm just kind of giving you some examples here. In the UAE, you've got, so their self-regulatory organization is the Advertising Business Group, but you also have the National Media Council, which basically police any adverts that are put into printed matters and publications, so anything that's put into the media, basically. So they've got a lot of laws. I've put up one example of one of their laws there, which is to do with the printed matters and publications, but there's a whole bunch of laws that they can act against, basically, and that's things like fines, can even be as harsh as imprisonment, depending on how offensive your advert is. So I would look at the National Media Council if you are advertising in the UAE. As mentioned, you've got the FDA in the USA, so they create laws, they work with the FTC quite closely, and they create laws to do with advertising, so they kind of make sure it's a law, rather than just kind of a recommendation or code of conduct. In China, you've got the advertising law of the People's Republic of China, and that was revised in 2015 to strengthen the consumer perception and impose tougher rules. So again, if you're advertising in China, have a little look at the update to the advertising law of the People's Republic of China, because that is going to be really important information there if you're advertising. But like I said, they are completely global. Every country has got advertising laws. Generally, the advertising self-regulations, their code of conduct is built around those laws. So you kind of don't have to look at both necessarily. Obviously, because if you're offending the advertising code of conduct, you're almost definitely offending laws as well. So yes, really important to be aware of everything. I just wanted to talk about COVID-19 again, in terms of advertising. So all of these organizations, ICAS, the EASA, the FDA, the FTC, and CONARED, who are part of South America, obviously there's other global ones as well, but this kind of basically lets you know that this is the kind of statements that these companies are putting out there, these organizations are putting out there about their code of conduct. So basically it's just being extremely cautious, just because there's COVID-19. And I know a lot of people are kind of making products based on issues surrounding COVID-19, for example, anti-bac hand gel. It's great. We need more anti-bac hand gel. There's a real shortage, but you cannot start offending the advertising laws that are out there, the advertising code of conduct that is out there as well. Just because you want to sell the product. So mainly the idea is that you don't want to kind of use people's fear of COVID-19 to make sure you're selling more products. And also there's some awful examples. The FTC website actually is a really good example of this, because they publish their warning letters that they've put out to people that have been advertising during COVID for products that's supposed to help COVID. And there's certain claims on there, like it will cure COVID, this mask provides complete protection against COVID. They're just not true. There's no claim of substantiation, there's no evidence behind it, and they're just kind of saying it to use people's fear to make sure they can sell those products. Sometimes people aren't aware of that they're used to doing this. I always say it with any kind of advertising law. If you see people's products people's adverts have been withdrawn because of something the ASA has said, not always does the company know that they've offended those laws. They might feel awful that they've offended those laws. So it might not be they're outright lying. They just might not have the right information about what they can put out there in their advertising. So these are all really good websites to look at as well, to see what kind of adverts have been withdrawn. There's many people that have come to us to say, you know, we've had our advert removed, but we've got clinical evidence which supports our claim. But the ASA have come to them and said, well, actually, the clinical study isn't enough information. You need a consumer study as well to say that the consumers can notice the effect with their naked eye. So there's a lot of information out there about those advertising standards, but it's just giving you guys an overview today about what, you know, how to find all of that. So now I talk about the advertising standards, and that's a lot of information. Like I said, it's always tough to research. If you aren't aware, it's just pointing you in the direction of being aware of what those advertising standards are. So now I really want to talk about cosmetic claims. If you are not in the cosmetic industry, don't worry, this really applies to any industry. It's just that there's some really good information out there about cosmetic claims, because that's where you see the most claims, advertising claims of any industry. We test for any industry, and of everyone, we are getting the most cosmetics and personal care products every day to test. And that's simply because that is where all of the claims are. You don't tend to see claims as kind of bold in other industries. It's more about just the product works or it doesn't, kind of efficacy testing. Whereas the cosmetics industry is so competitive and there are so many things that your consumers want. There are so many claims that you can make. So this is kind of directed at cosmetics, but if you're in any other industry, please feel free to carry on listening. It will apply everywhere. So we've got the EU Cosmetics Products Regulation, which have stated 6 common criteria for cosmetic claims. So I think these are really helpful just to give you an overview of when you're thinking about what claims you want to make. Make sure that you're always hitting these criteria, basically. It kind of applies to every advert. So I'll explain them in a bit more detail. So legal compliance. Basically, this means that if you can't sort of state legal compliance about your product as a claim. So if you say, oh, it complies with the EU Cosmetics Products Regulation, well, it has to. It's illegal if it doesn't comply with it. So it's not a claim about your product. And it's kind of basically what it's doing is you're kind of assuming that if yours says that, people might question it and say, oh, does this other product not comply with the EU Cosmetics Regulation? When of course it does, it has to by law. So you can't say things like that on there. It needs to be truthful, so you can't say that the product contains, vitamin C if it just doesn't. That's kind of the example there. You've got to be completely truthful. Maybe it's something like it's orange coloured and you're sort of saying it's a vitamin C product, but actually it's just the colouring in the fragrance, something like that. You always need to have evidential support. Obviously, that's the main part of this webinar. It's about substantiating those claims. So we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. It's got to be honest. So if you've got evidential support and say you had a consumer study with 100 people, but then you said, okay, so we've got 80% of 100 people. If we repeated the test, we definitely have 80% out of 200 people. So let's just say 200 people. So that's not honest. So you always have to quote everything correctly, all of your research correctly, and be very honest. It's got to be fair. So if you're doing a comparison study, for example, and let's say we were looking at a long-lasting lipstick and you said, oh, it lasts longer than this brand, but that's not a long-lasting lipstick. It's just a lipstick that's not got any long-lasting properties. You can't say that because obviously there's no fairness there. You can't say a lipstick lasts longer when it's been formulated to do so when the other one hasn't. And you need to make sure that your consumers can have informed decision making. So it's making sure your claims are really clear. Basically that's it. They're super clear on your packaging and in your online advertising, so that they know that they can make a really informed decision about purchasing your product. There's also different types of claim. And again, this is always a good place to start if you're thinking about advertising your product, because once you've kind of decided where your claims fit in and types of claim, it really helps guide you on the type of research you're going to need to substantiate those claims. So sensory claims and also product aesthetic claims kind of fit under the same bracket. It's all about how does the product feel to the touch, how does it look, do I like the appearance of the product, what about the packaging, do I like the packaging, everything that's to do with the sensory, the smell, things like that, fragrance of the product. They're all sensory claims. They can all be substantiated with consumer research. Performance claims is essentially the efficacy of the product. If it's supposed to make the skin soft, does it make the skin soft? If it's supposed to make the skin hydrated, does it? It's supposed to remove your hair. Does it remove your hair? Everything like that. So it's quite straightforward. Does the product perform as it should? Ingredient claims. Does the product contain the what ingredients does the product contain? Do you have evidence about the ingredient that you would like to quote within your product? Really important to note, the final product always needs testing, but there's no reason why you can't say it contains this ingredient. So for example, we see things like it contains soothing aloe vera. You can say that, that's great, but also make sure you've got your final product tested to make sure that soothing effect, can still be noticed by the consumers. So, but ingredient claims can be really good. Combination claims, do these products work well together? So for example, you might have a skincare regime you want to sell as a set, a cleanser, a toner, day cream, night cream, eye cream. You test them all together and say, these work best when you use them as the set. It helps you sell that entire regime rather than just one product. A comparison study, that's quite self-explanatory. So it could be some against a competitor. We see that a lot in the States again. So this product performs better than this brand. Or it could be this product that performs better than the leading brand. You don't even have to mention the brand itself. And that it could be against another formula. So it could say a new and improved formula. That's a comparison claim against your old formula. You need to have some evidence there to say that it does perform better. So there's a lot about comparison studies if people are interested in comparison claims. Like I said, don't think of that just as a competitive thing. It can often be against your own formulas if you're reformulating, but there is a lot of evidence that you need if you're going to make claims like that. Subjective claims is basically what consumer research is. So it's consumer perception. I perceive this effect. I would buy this product. That's my subjective feeling about the product. It's how I feel. And objective claims are science. Instrumental studies. Does this, it's something that can't be, it's not an opinion. It's simply, what is shown in the instrument studies. This product does reduce these wrinkles by this percentage. That's an objective claim. So that's an overview of the kind of claims that you can make. Now, if you haven't heard of consumer research, you haven't done consumer research before, I just want to give you an overview of what we do, ASIN Global Research, because we're a consumer research company. Now, consumer research is basically the in-use tests that are based on the consumer perception of the product. So it's not about science, it's not about instrumental studies. We are simply saying, does the consumer notice this effect when they use the product themselves? It's reflecting the actual conditions of the product in use. So whereas an instrumental study can be important for objective claims because you're saying, this does reduce the wrinkles, a consumer perception product is going, when I bought this product and followed the instructions, as I would when I purchased it in a shop, I did also notice that my wrinkles had diminished. So a lot of the time you need both clinical and consumer research. Sometimes you can use just consumer research because if you don't need those objective claims, you just want to get an idea of what the consumers perceive, you can substantiate your claims with just the consumer research, which is pretty time effective and cost effective as well. So it's really important to do some consumer research as well. The other kind of reason for the actual product, actual conditions of a product in use, is also for the safety assessment. Because obviously, if you have a safety assessment, you have a dermatologist apply it. So obviously cosmetic products need a safety assessment. The dermatologist applies it, it's on a small group of people, you get an idea of that. But what happens when that consumer actually takes it home and starts using it themselves? Are there any irritations reported? Are there any adverse reactions? It assesses that safety criteria as well. So that, in-home user studies is what we tend to use. So as mentioned, that's the one that reflects it. So we send the product to test at home and they answer online questionnaires. They can also do things like upload videos, upload before and after photos. We can get professional before and after photos. There's a lot of other options that I probably don't talk about enough because there's just so much we can do with consumer research. Usually they're looking at the efficacy of one product or they might be comparing it. We touched on that. As mentioned, for some claims, you may need additional evidence. But as I mentioned in my kind of introduction, that's really where my speciality is within the company. If you have certain claims you want to make about your product, you tell me what the type of product is, what the claims are you want to make, and I can tell you what evidence you are going to need to substantiate your claims, whether it's the consumer research that we conduct or whether we point you in the direction of one of our partners for some clinical research as well. It's really important that we're making sure your adverts are compliant. So why else to conduct consumer research? So I've talked about advertising, so testing the product's efficacy, testing the substantiating the advertising claims. It's also making sure that you're testing it in the right market. So when I was talking about online sales and how you might have uncompliant claims in a certain market, one of the examples I can use for that is if you have if you're a UK company, you've tested your product in the UK on UK volunteers. So as we know, maybe it's in the winter, it's quite a cool temperature over here. Generally, the UK population is quite a dry skin type in the winter. But then your product starts selling really, really well in the UAE. Now there's a really high temperature all year round there. So there's different ambient temperature for that product's performance. And also people tend to have an oilier skin in the UAE. So the actual efficacy of the product could be very different. So if someone purchases your product in the UAE and says, this doesn't work, I made my skin feel greasy, the actual consistency in the jar didn't last, the stability of the product, what they can do is complain about your product. And if you have not got any evidence to say it's supposed to work with the claims that you've got with the claims you've got quoted in your advertising, those advertising claims are uncompliant because you've not tested the product there. So I'm not saying you have to test your product in every single market that you're selling a product. If you're completely global, that would be a lot of research. But what it is, it's making sure that you have a reflection of each market. So we've got global companies that will test their products in the UK, but also in sort of a few countries that are really hot in Asia, like Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand, because they know they're a really humid temperature, and that's how they really want to test the product's efficacy there. And we can really help again select those territories as well, if you're not sure about your advertising. As well as making sure those claims are compliant, you're also finding out if your product is accepted in those countries. So again, if you're global, you might say, okay, well, we've got big markets in the UK and the USA. We know that's a similar ambient temperature, similar skin types there, obviously depending state to state, but let's give it an overview on the efficacy. But the market might be quite different. You might find that the UK market really loves the product and the USA market doesn't as much. There's going to be some differences. So you might want to just test your product in the markets to make sure it's actually accepted there and what people's propensity to buy it is before you launch it there, and kind of risk seeing if it's a success or not. So yeah, you can really target your key demographic and see what market suits your product. When you're targeting your key demographic, it's not just about territory, but it's about who actually purchases your product. If you know you want to sell your product in boots, you might want to test it on boots customers. If you know that the product is a really high-end luxury product and that it's going to cost about $100 on the market, you might want to test it on people that would be willing to spend that in the first place. So again, we can really help with panel criteria. It's just another thing you can really do with consumer research. Because they're sent to test in home, we can test anywhere globally on any participant as long as they have access to the internet and they can answer their online questionnaires. What kind of examples of claims are there? And I'll be showing these in the case studies anyway, but it gives you a few ideas. 80% of people agree that it moisturizes the skin. 9 out of 10 women would recommend this product to a friend, and 96% of people agree it's the best their skin has ever looked. So it gives you an idea of what those perception claims are, things that you can't really prove by science or that you want to back up further with consumer perception. So now I'm going to go through those case studies. So I've got 2 to go through today, and I've got some lovely claims from our clients. So I really wanted to share these because they've used their consumer research really effectively online. So I'm going to give you a summary of what the study was and then show you how they've managed to do that. So the first one I want to talk about is Skinny Tan. So if people are familiar with Skinny Tan, they're an Australian company. They were developed in Australia. The idea was to create a kind of natural looking tan for the market. I'd be surprised if you haven't seen them. They're huge on social media. So again, another reason why they wanted to really make sure that they were getting good online claims. So it's an Australian company, but for this study, we'd already conducted the study in Australia. They really wanted to get those claims here in the UK. Because that's where they're really looking at expanding that market again. Online sales, they knew they could really expand their market in the UK. So we're looking at substantiating the claims that are relevant to the predominant skin types and ambient temperature for the climate in the UK. In particular, the claims they were looking at was that it lasts a minimum of 10 days, produces a natural looking tan, and improves the appearance of skin imperfections. That's the idea. It's like a wonder serum. It doesn't just give you a tan, but it makes your skin look great. and that it lasts a nice amount of time as well. So what is the legislation? So I've picked up on the legislation actually in Australia to do with advertising, having evidence to substantiate your claims. So Ad Standards Australia say that to establish that advertising or marketing communication is not misleading or deceptive, an advertiser may be required to provide substantiation of any claims made. So provide the substantiation to Ad Standards. This means that an advertiser may have reasonable basis for their claims. So it's basically saying, I can say these claims because I have this evidence. And again, that it might be in the form of tests, studies, or expert reports, depending on the type of claim made. And again, we can assist you with what kind of evidence you need there. So that's just kind of, every single advertising standard organization worldwide has some kind of quote here about evidence. But as mentioned, they already needed that evidence from Australia, and they were looking at testing in the UK. So what was the protocol for the study? So we conducted it in the UK, of course. It was a single placement study, which basically means we're investigating one product. It was not a comparison. It had to be 10 days because we wanted that 10-day tan. Obviously, they had a target age range of who they knew as their target consumer. It has to be tested on white Caucasian skin of a fair to medium tone because that is who the shade of tan is suitable for. And they had to be presenting those skin imperfections, so things like cellulite, thread veins, spots and blemishes on the face and the body, because we wanted them to use it all over. And it had to be national. We had to have the whole of the UK to make sure this product, the data was going to be reliable. So here's the results from the report, and then I'm going to show you how that's shown online. So this is a kind of extract, from our online PDF report. So our reports are in lead time. We have a client portal for all of our clients that you get a log into. As soon as your study is live, you can download the reports. So even if one person has answered the questionnaire, all of that statistical analysis is built into the system, and you can look at this summary report that I've put here straight away. Obviously, you want to wait till you've got your minimum responses, but it just means that we've got really, really quick lead times for that final report. Because if all of the volunteers you need to answer within sort of 2 days, you can download that report straight away. And all of the statistical analysis is built in for the individual question analysis, but you also have this overall summary report, which basically says which claims are substantiated and which aren't. So there are some amazing substantiation from this product. Just to explain it, we've got the question on the left-hand side. We've got the number of people that are satisfied, neutral, not satisfied, and the percentage of people that are satisfied, neutral, not satisfied. So we are looking at the percentage of satisfied, which is the ones with the little asterisks next to them. The asterisk is derived from the pass rate that is set by the client. So if you want just a statistical majority, just to understand the efficacy of the product, we might say, okay, let's do a 66% pass rate because that is a statistical majority. If you want to use the product claims on things like television, we know we need a 70% pass rate because they won't accept, ClearCast won't accept any claims that are less than 70%. So that's the pass rate we set. And then really, really simply, it just shows you with an asterisk which claims have actually passed. So we've got on our left-hand side, as mentioned, we've got our questions. So for example, 86% of them of the participants agreed that the self-tanning serum was easier to apply than other tanners they had tried. Then we've got 98% of people saying about a glowing bronze immediately after applying. 92% said it smelt better than other tanners. 90% said it was a more natural looking tan than other tanners. So again, really, really high claims there. It's quite a small amount of volunteers on there, quite a small number of volunteers there. It's because we already had some substantiation from the previous product, from the previous study in Australia. So we only needed a small pool of volunteers, a smaller pool of volunteers in the UK. And I can always assist with the amount of volunteers that I think is necessary for claim substantiation. So how were the advertising claims shown? So this is from their website. So on the website, they have kind of quoted that they were so confident that Wonder Serum was a standout performer that they gave unbranded samples to be independently trialed by 50 volunteers in an independent consumer research exam. So unbranded is really important for claim substantiation. It makes sure there's no bias towards your brand. So we always do claim substantiation studies as unbranded. And this is kind of the results, how they've put it. So as you can see, 86% said as we lifted in the other one, that it was easier to apply. well, all of those percentage. As you can see, they're all over 80%. They're really high, and some 90% in there. It looks amazing on their website. It makes people really want to purchase their product. Again, this is off Facebook. So we've got people saying, we've got the claims again as they were stated on their website. So the product contained by Eaton Global, with all the results on there. And they've also got this kind of like key one, this key quote in the middle, which is saying 9 out of 10 people said Wonder Serum gave them a more even and flawless tan color than other self-tanners they've tried. So they were able to get that from the data as well. And obviously, as you can see, these have all they've had to kind of quote the amount of people that has been tested on and everything like that. So yeah, some excellent kind of examples of how they've managed to use those claims on their social media and on their website. The next one I want to talk about is Temple Spa. So again, Temple Spa are kind of a really luxury skincare brand. If you're familiar with their brand, they do some really nice products that are kind of from the spa into the home. That's kind of how I'd explain their brand. Kind of started as a bit of a spa brand, but now it is direct to consumer. They have a similar model to things like Avon, where you can, have the the representatives come and do parties, but you can also purchase their products online. So they basically had this product called Double Cream, which is a hydrating moisturizer. They're looking to grow their customer base in the UK, so they wanted to make sure they had some claims to substantiate their product. They also wanted to make sure that they had a gap analysis for future overseas, because obviously they're going to launch globally. They're starting to launch globally, so they need to make sure they've got those where's the claims lie in the UK before they look at those other markets. So in particular, they were really looking at the claims about skin nourishment, hydration, and the soft skin feel. So because it's in the UK, I still wanted to talk about the EASA and what they say about advertising claims, because they were doing the study in the UK, but to be able to substantiate for the EU market as well. So basically, the EASA that you need to have you need to have documentary evidence before any of your adverts go into the public eye, which can be objectively judged. You need to be able to provide this. If you get any complaint about your product, you need to be able to provide it without delay. The reason they say that is it means that you can't kind of retrospectively go, okay, there's been a complaint about a product, they've asked for claim substantiation, we don't have it, we need to get the claim substantiation now. That's going to be very, very hard to do if you've got a product, for example, that might have a 3-month claim on it. You can't quickly provide a 3-month study. So always make sure you have it before you put the product on the market, because otherwise you're really at risk of not having that evidence when it gets put under scrutiny by the EASA or similar SRO. What was the protocol for this study? It was a single placement study again, but we're looking at replacing their usual moisturizer because it's sort of a day cream moisturizer. It's 28 days, so it's a bit longer because the claims we're looking at, we felt like it would need a bit longer for the volunteers to really be able to perceive the claims. They needed to use a cleanser, toner and moisturizer because we wanted them to carry on with their normal skincare regime. So using a cleanser and toner as well as the moisturizer. They needed to have dry to very dry skin because obviously this is about being a really hydrating, like super hydrating product. And again, we're looking at their target age range, which is 25 to 60, and a national campaign for all volunteers across the UK rather than kind of looking somewhere specific. So it can be really reliable. So the results from our report, again, we've got 91% saying their skin feels intensely nourished, 95 saying it feels hydrated, 91 saying it feels super soft, 93% saying it has a rich creamy texture. These are incredibly high results, all over 90%. So obviously, Temple Spa want to use this in their advertising online because, well, I mean, you're definitely going to sell products if you have really high results like this. So this is how it looked on their website. So they've got their percentage straight from the report, as you can see, as the same kind of the same claims that are on the report I've put here that from their website. But I also wanted to put the testimonials. So what Temple Spa did really cleverly as well for their advertising is made sure that there was a free text box at the end to say, you know, what would you review? What would you say about the product if you were to review it? And as long as those comments really reflected the main data that was in the study, so obviously, you know, if people didn't agree with the claims and had some amazing testimonials, you couldn't use those testimonials because it's not true. But obviously these ones did. So they've been able to use these testimonials as well in their advertising online. So they've got things like, I absolutely loved using this moisturizer and looked forward to using it every day. I love this cream. People commented on how plumped my skin looked. I love this hydrating moisturizer. After 3 days of use, it significantly decreased the appearance of fine lines. These are amazing testimonials. People are going to buy this. And this is separate to the product reviews they have on their website. So they've got loads of information for their consumers on their website about how good this product is. So when people go on there, you know, they're really going to be able to sell some extra products. They also use their claims on social media. So this is from Facebook and also from Instagram. They've got 91% of people who trialed double cream agree the moisturizer left their skin feeling intensely nourished. Indulgence in a jar. And again, they've used the same quote, intensely nourished, for their Instagram. So that's brilliant. There's some really lovely claims that they've been able to use on their social media as well. So there's the case studies I wanted to share with you. I just want to go through some more legislation. I think it's really important to kind of round off all those kind of methods people use for advertising their products online. So the main thing I'll talk about is product reviews. There's a real misconception. There's certain companies out there that are basically a product review platform, and they say, you know, use us, we'll get some product reviews for you, and you can we'll put them straight onto your website. That's fine, but you need to make sure you also have claim substantiation. Anything that's said in product review isn't a claim, and it can't be seen as a claim by your consumer without having that evidential support. So that I know there's a few companies out there that are kind of getting away with having product reviews on their websites without having any claim substantiation, and it's really misleading advertising because it's basically using what the product reviewers have said as an advert, which you absolutely cannot do unless you've got some kind of evidence behind it as well. So I really want to put that out there and make sure that really use reviews responsibly. They are a fantastic way of advertising your product, but always make sure you also have evidence because it can't look like a claim. Social media influencers. So again, you need to have evidence for anything an influencer is saying. Again, I know there are companies out there that are using influencers to market their product without having any claim substantiation. Anything that a social media influencer is saying about your product, which could be perceived as a claim to advertise the product, needs to be substantiated. I would view it very much how shopping channels like QVC do, where every bit of script that the people on QVC are saying about the product has got to be substantiated. It's the same kind of thing. Anything the influencer is saying about your product should be substantiated with some kind of evidence, and you should be guiding these influencers. When you send them your products to review, you should say, okay, these are the effects that it has. This is the research we have behind it. This is what you can say about the product, because otherwise you're really upsetting a lot of those fair competition laws, which are to do with advertising your product without evidence. You also need to make sure you've got hashtags in there. I think everyone kind of knows about this now. So things like hashtag paid ad, hashtag ad, and it can't be in too many other hashtags. That kind of came in about 3 years ago. I went to an ASA conference about it because people kind of hiding all the advertising hashtags within lots of other hashtags. So it wasn't very clear it was an advert, which isn't, again, it's not fair to the consumer. You're not giving them informed decision making because they think it's a genuine review rather than a paid advert. And I just wanted to give an example of a penalty. So the UAE, they've got fines for the influencers that don't use the hashtag ad and hashtag paid to sort of show that it's show there's an advert. And so the actual influencers themselves get massive fines, as you can see, kind of up to 20,000 dirham. Which is, that's for the second offence, so there could be a lot of money there. So just really important to know what the kind of offences are out there as well if you're an influencer yourself as well. Other things to be really wary of when selling online is e-commerce fraud. So I think this was something that was really brought into light a few years ago, where people were, there was basically undercover watchdogs that were bought loads of products on things like Amazon from third-party sellers and found that it wasn't the real brand and that they actually contained really sort of poisonous substances, so I can think of the right word then, really awful substances like cyanide, mercury, rat droppings. It's disgusting, and it's a real horrible thing for that brand, because they're not selling that product. It's not their product. Someone has counterfeited it and made their brand look really bad. There's been a huge lockdown on it, so really this is 2018 from all of this, which is when it all kind of really got brought to light, and I think there's kind of been a lot more put in place, but it's still very much a risk. Basically, if you know, obviously if it's on your website, you're fine, people buy from your website, but you want to be able to sell on platforms like Amazon, because they are incredibly successful for really generating large amounts of e-commerce sales. So it's just something to be aware of, basically. Interesting from Cosmetic Business, it says countries like Mexico and Brazil actually have kind of a bad rep because they've had some counterfeit products come from their countries, but actually it's a really small percentage of the genuine products that are sold out there. So it shows how damaging it can be, because obviously it's not just even the companies, it's kind of the whole country is getting tarnished with the export that's coming out of it, which is completely unfair. Same about Germany. Rates are kind of lower than average in Europe, but still the beauty online sales dominate the rest of Europe. So I kind of want to put that in there to say it's damaging, but also it can't be that damaging if Germany's still doing really well. Maybe that's why they've got the highest amount of counterfeit products, because they've got the highest amount of products being sold online anyway. So yeah, it was just kind of bringing that to your attention. If you're selling online, be careful about e-commerce fraud. So that's kind of the overview of the entire presentation about online sales. I've kind of talked about consumer research and some of the case studies we've conducted, but why else should you use us as kind of the big sell now? So we're an award-winning research company. We won awards for Family Business of the Year, International Business of the Year. We won internship awards, and we're really, really proud of the research that we're putting out there. We are completely GDPR compliant, and we've got an ISO 27001, which we are audited on our GDPR compliance for that. So you can be really safe in the knowledge that not only is all of our participants' data, we've got over 560,000 participant panelists across the globe that we send products to. So it's really important to make sure that their data is anonymized, and that they are completely protected. But also it's your data as well as our clients. We've got really sensitive information about your new product launches. So it's making sure that we've got a data protection officer who is constantly observing that. Things about the undesirable event reporting. So I said we've got real-time reporting for our product tests, and that product tests are important for the actual use of undesirable events, but it's also in real time. So when you are conducting a study with us, you can log in at any point. It's all made in accordance with the Cosmetic Vigilance Act. So you can be really confident that you're going to be able to access those results. Your responsible person, losing my train of thought then. Your responsible person can also have access to that, so that they can see your undesirable events at the click of a button at any time throughout the study process. We've got an ISO 9001, which is about quality assurance and our document management. We've got product liability insurance. Not every research provider does in consumer studies, but they very much should. It protects you as well as us if there's anything that happens to a consumer. It's never happened, don't panic. But it means that if anything's wrong with the product or wrong with the instructions we've given them, and they have an adverse reaction about the product, we are insured about anything that we're putting in the hands of our panelists, because they're essentially all consumers. We're a partner to the Market Research Society, so you know that we're following their code of conduct to make sure that our research is ethical. We're making sure we're conducting ethical research, as well as good research design and questionnaire design that comes from the MRS. We can invite regulatory advice. As mentioned, that is my job. If you've got any question about anything regulatory, always ask me as well. As mentioned, I'm really consumer research focused, but actually it's really in my interest. I find it really interesting to know as much about the regulations as possible. A lot of clients are quite surprised with how much information I can give them, but they're not really sure about all of regulatory advice. And also I have connections. So if you're ever unsure, if I'm ever unsure, I can connect you with the right people. You always get a designated study manager as well. So I talked about that earlier. A designated study manager will learn you and your company inside and out, and make sure to really understand how to run your studies to make sure that you get the best product claims that you can use in all of your marketing. Some further advice, and then I'll go into the question and answers section. So we always say panel size starting at 100 responses, depending on the study. As mentioned earlier, sometimes it can be smaller, but sometimes it mustn't be much bigger. But 100 responses is basically where I would sort of say kind of aim. If you've not conducted consumer research before, we have a lot of people come to say, how many responses should we be looking at? General guidance is 100. Obviously, if you're looking at things like, I want it to be suitable for all ethnicities, I want it to be suitable for all skin types, all hair types, we may need to have a much larger panel, because we need to make sure we've got a significant amount of each of those panel requirements on your study. I've talked about product liability insurance, so I think that's really clear. Your products must have been safety tested. So we need to make sure that they're basically safety tested to the point where they could be released on the market, because that's the point where we are testing the consumers. They are the panelists, sorry, they're basically your consumer. They're testing it at home. It needs to be safe for them to use. They're not getting monitored testing the product. I've already said about sample debranding, so make sure that you've got blind studies for claim substantiation. Ensure your questionnaire design will always support your claims, and again, we can design your questionnaires for you and make sure that that is all there. You can always seek professional advice from us. So now I'm going to go to question and answers. I knew that was a really meaty presentation, so it might take a while for you to sort of digest that. I know there's a lot of information there, but yeah, I'd really like to open it up to questions now. So if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to type away. And as mentioned, you can contact me anyway if you want some time to take away all of that information. Let us settle in before asking any questions. So I'll just leave that open for a minute. I can't see any questions coming in. I don't want to hold you up all too much. So as mentioned, I will be sending the recording. So like I said, that's a lot of information, but I get so excited. I just want to tell you guys everything. So feel free to watch the recording back and have a little look through it. And if you've got any questions, or if you want to discuss any projects, if you've kind of gone, right, I definitely want to do some consumer research to substantiate my claims, just hit me up on email, and we can discuss those projects in more detail. So I just want to finish off by talking about the SCS. Our founder and managing director, Susan Ayton, has recently been appointed onto the committee of the SCS. I'm very proud of her, but it means that she's going to be really involved in making sure that obviously the people that are part of the SCS are getting really good information that's going to be really helpful. But also we're letting you guys know that aren't part of the SCS why you should join on also the amazing events that they have on. So there is a distance learning course. So that is a recognised course in the essentials of cosmetic science. It's distance learning, so you can do it anywhere in the world. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about cosmetic science, you can look on their website there, on the link to cosmeticlearning.com. There's also going to be the IFSCC Congress, which is in September 2022. It's a nice while away yet, so although lots of things have been cancelled this year, we very much hope that will still be going ahead. And you can register your interest online at their website there. So there's the contact information for our general office. As mentioned, I'll be emailing this link. It will come from my email address, so you'll be able to reply to me with any questions you might have. I really hope you enjoyed that. And yes, thank you very much again for registering. I really appreciate your kind of audience there. Thank you very much.